Howdy. Today's Monday, July 19th, and I'm going to read this thread by Bruce Fenton. He's on Twitter. I'll put it here, Bruce Fenton. And every once in a while, we all read a thread that kind of is one of those where it's like, hey, that's kind of exactly what I've been trying to say. I've certainly said it myself a lot. So this guy Bruce's thread, who I was not following him before, it was retweeted by a friend of mine, and this caught my eye. Bruce Fenton says, I was terrified in February 2020. I saw the viral videos of people dropping dead in the streets, the massive China quarantines. I tracked the cases, Italy, the cruise ship, the plane, the Seattle nursing home. We faced an unknown risk with a massive potential downside. Let me just stop right there. I was a month before, well, I was probably a month and a half before Bruce. I saw the falling down videos in late December. I remember it was actually Christmas Eve or Christmas night. Watching TikTok, I was looking at TikTok and I was like, what the fuck? But I agree. Even in February, it was still an unknown. The WHO had the IFR of this thing pegged at 3 to 5%. Right? We had falling down videos and we had 3 to 5%. And he goes on. By March 17, 2020, it seemed possible this virus would ravage our world. I thought people who went out on St. Patrick's Day were insane, risking their lives, and others, we saw the dire warning of Italy. We were always 2 weeks away from disaster. I sounded the alarm like a fool. And then this guy, Bruce, does something that is so important. And this is how you can tell who the actual courageous people are, because they do this. And I try and do this too, but it hurts. It's not pleasant to do what Bruce does here, and that's this. He quote tweets himself from March 20th. And this is his tweet. I'm not going to read the whole thread, but his tweet that he quotes is one of the thread: the virus will not stop by itself. We must stop it, all of us. This isn't about insurance or overtime pay or political parties or socialized medicine or the hassles of having kids sent home. This is about stopping a very bad virus that we must stop. We must. COVID-19. And let's see, March 6th. I probably wouldn't have agreed with this at this point, but I completely understand where he was at, because we were all there at some point. And as you'll see as I read this thread, the difference here, it's kind of not if, it's when. It's when are you going to see, when are you going to understand that the cure is worse than the disease itself? And not only just worse health-wise on every single front, but worse everywhere-wise. Bruce goes on. I listened to Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who has locked his account, and he also listened to Yanir Bar Yam. He listened to those two guys who said that we just needed 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember this? If we could just shut down for only 2 weeks, the reasoning went, the virus would die out. If not, then we faced massive death in the streets and would see morgues in Central Park. We all heard this. I read up on science. I tuned in to the WHO daily briefings. I followed dozens of epidemiologists. I became a prepper and I moved to the country. When I heard that people would be dying because of a lack of ventilators, I made this my mission. Quote tweet again. Ventilators, please read. We need to make ventilators that can be legally used by hospitals, and we need to do it right now, tonight. As many of us as possible need to get on this, share and recruit. Let's see what open source can do. I believe in you. I made calls. I wrote articles and recruited people. I joined Yanir and Taleb's group, the New England Complex Systems Institute, and its Stop COVID initiative. I decided I would do everything I could to get ventilators. The New Yorker even picked up my efforts. But as I was interviewed for the New Yorker in March, I was already becoming concerned with what I saw. By the time the article was published, I was skeptical of the need for ventilators at all. I had heard this from Cuomo's briefings, and my research did not jive with what he said. In a complex series of business deals with insiders, Cuomo had New York paying $20,000 for ventilators, worth $500. Try as I might with calls and volunteers reaching out to hospitals, we couldn't actually find any real shortage of these machines. Meanwhile, authoritarianism increased. The world shared videos of the tough Italian mayors passionately yelling at people to stay indoors. Then I saw restrictions on going outside. Whoa, 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 restrictions on being outside? That's not in any of the recommendations I've seen. That's not science, was my reaction. Then we saw all those absolute idiots who partied on St. Patrick's Day or went to church in Florida against the government order did not suddenly drop dead. The USS Mercy and the USS Comfort had sailed into LA and New York City with patriotic fanfare, but the ships were empty. We were told to stay home because the overload on the hospital system, but that never came. Hospitals were empty. Surgeries and other important visits were all delayed due to fears of overload, which never happened. This is one of the many second-order effects we saw. While I had called for panic in January and February based on the unknown, even in my greatest hysteria, I never called for lockdowns or limits in personal freedom. Meanwhile, places without the lockdowns seemed to not have the mass death predicted. We also saw that people could get this illness and never even know it without a test. With weak evidence, we accepted asymptomatic spread as a thing. This was also when we changed the hundreds-year-old definition of what sick means. Not only did we change the definition of what sick means, we decided to treat everyone as sick until proven innocent. In April 2020, I saw a mom arrested at a playground for letting her kids play on a swing set. Surely the public would see this and end the insanity, I hoped. The virus turned out to be far less deadly than feared. As with all flus, it is dangerous and deadly to some. Yet the tyranny increased. Previously unimaginable restrictions on basic human rights became common. Meanwhile, places without the restrictions had no worse results. The bad data around ventilators was just the beginning. By May, we saw COVID become even more political. Death counts were changed to include everyone who ever even had a positive test or even had symptoms. Even shooting victims were counted as COVID deaths. And we all know the rest. Politicization of science, mass censorship of opinions, data, or even medical and scientific opinions that differed from the official line, whimsical shifting of opinions and policies, a year more of lockdowns, with exceptions, of course, for the left-allied protesters. Finally, Florida said no more. Governor DeSantis said he would never do a lockdown again. The lockdowners and the media said that this would cause mass death. And just like the previous predictions of doom, it turned out not to be the case. Texas followed Florida and also reopened. The lockdowners were losing their grip. People weren't going to stay inside any longer. Then, almost instantly, the narrative shifted. It wasn't COVID that was as deadly as we feared. It was the vaccine that saved the day. So go on one right now. Total gaslighting. We've been lied to consistently and seen more of our freedoms and human rights destroyed than perhaps any generation in history. We lost when we got into debates over science. The reality is that government should never have such powers, no matter how serious a virus. The idea that some people in fancy government offices know better than the citizens, and this gives them moral authority to use violence on peaceful people, is barbaric and evil. Every person should be able to take the risks they choose based on their evaluation of risk. End thread. Good for Bruce.